Reflections on the Good News of Jesus Christ for the 14th Sunday of Ordinary Time from the Gospel of Mark. Jesus departed from there and came to his native place, accompanied by his disciples. When the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue, and many who heard him were astonished. They said, "Where did this man get all this? What kind of wisdom has been given him? What mighty deeds are wrought by his hands? Is he not the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the brother of James and Joses and Judas and Simon? And are not his sisters here with us?" And they took offense at him. Jesus said to them, "A prophet is not without honor except in his native place, and among his own kin, and in his own house." So he was not able to perform any mighty deed there, apart from curing a few sick people by laying his hands on them. He was amazed at their lack of faith. The good news of the Lord. Ludwig van Beethoven had a rather awkward playing style and preferred to work at his own compositions rather than play the classical artists of his day. His teacher disapproved of his technique and called him helpless as a composer. Albert Einstein did not speak until he was 4 and could not read until age 9. He was described by his schoolmaster as mentally slow, unsociable, and adrift in his foolish dreams. An expert once said of the great football coach Vince Lombardi, "He possesses minimal football knowledge and lacks motivation." Socrates was written off as an immoral corrupter of youth. Louisa May Alcott's family thought she was hardly educable and encouraged her to find work as a seamstress or house servant. When F.W. Woolworth first sought work at a dry goods store, his employers said he did not have the intelligence to wait on customers. Richard Hooker's humorous war novel, MASH, was rejected by 21 publishers before it became a bestseller, a movie, and a long-running television series. Thomas Edison's teachers advised his parents to keep him home from school, stating that he was, quote, "too stupid to learn anything." In his autobiography, Charles Darwin wrote, "I was considered by all my masters and my father as a very ordinary boy, rather below the common standard in intellect." Walt Disney was fired by a newspaper editor who complained that he was lacking in creative ideas. The sculptor Rodin was described as the worst pupil in his school. He failed 3 times to secure admission to a school of art. His father said, "I have an idiot for a son." After Fred Astaire's first screen test, the memo from the testing director said, "Can't act, slightly bald, can dance a little." My brothers and sisters, so many of the people we regard as great have had tremendous obstacles to overcome on their respective paths to greatness. John Milton was blind. Beethoven and Thomas Edison were deaf. Alexander the Great, Alexander Pope, Stephen A. Douglas, and Franklin D. Roosevelt were crippled. Miguel de Cervantes stuttered. Abraham Lincoln failed in 2 businesses, had a nervous breakdown, was rejected from law school, lost 4 jobs and 8 elections before he was elected president. Thank God, none of these people stopped trying. They all kept on going, despite all the setbacks, rejections, and failures. And St. Paul tells us that he frequently wrestled with weaknesses that he could not overcome. But out of his weakness, he learned that God's grace was enough for him, for in weakness, power reaches perfection. If you have ever found yourself overwhelmed by life's challenges, but have somehow survived in spite of your weakness, you may have learned this critically important lesson, that God's grace is enough for us, for in our weakness, and apparently only in our weakness, God's power can reach perfection. You see, if we could always do it ourselves, we might go through life thinking that we don't really need God at all. We may still pray, go to church, be terribly religious, but we don't really need God if we can do it ourselves. And we would never know how much more God could do with and through us if only we gave God the chance. And then we come to Jesus. By this time in his ministry, he had already met with opposition and rejection from the Jewish authorities. But now it is those nearest and dearest who reject him, his friends, neighbors, even his own family. Because his hometown neighbors and friends thought they knew all about Jesus, they did not expect greatness from him. Their lack of faith proved to be an obstacle. They found Jesus too much for them. He did not fit into their preconceived idea of the boy next door and the son of the carpenter. As a result of their narrow-mindedness, their need to judge and label, Jesus could work no great deeds among them. They thought they knew him, but they really didn't know him at all. They'd grown up with him, they knew his family, but again, they really didn't know him at all. What is this story telling us? That God appears not in the spectacular, but in the simple, and we miss him. We're assuming that God's appearances will be far greater than any 4th of July fireworks gala, and we miss his presence in the love of a friend or family member, the forgiveness from someone we have wronged, the encouragement from someone who still believes in us when we don't believe in ourselves. We miss his coming in word, bread, and wine. What could be more simple and less spectacular than a bit of bread and a sip of wine? We look for God to be our own version of a superhero, and we miss God present at the table, present in others, present in us. As was true with the good people of Nazareth, without our faith, Jesus can do nothing in our lives either. Last week, in the cures of the daughter of the synagogue official and the woman with a hemorrhage, we saw that faith can accomplish great things. Today, we see that lack of faith prevents great things in ourselves and in others. Faithfulness, faith in God, faith in others, faith in ourselves, is key to discipleship. Not success, not perfection, faithfulness. How are we living in faith today? What might God be trying to do, wanting to do in your life right now? And there's a good chance you're missing it because it's not what you expected or even what you wanted from God. Jesus came home. They all knew him, but in fact, none of them knew him. And he wasn't even wearing a disguise. But he does now. Now he is disguised as your friend. your family member, your neighbor, especially that pesky one, is disguised as, oh, but you can fill in the blank. What might God want you to do in that person's life? Thanks for listening.